What's up, fellow music nerds? Matrix here, and you are locked into the Matrix Music Review Podcast, the only place to get your alternative music fix. And we have another big week this week. Had another really strong album from one of my recently discovered bands earlier this year that has just burst onto my scene and become one of my favorites right away. A couple of new discoveries as well, because you guys know I'm always trying to give you the newest and greatest bands that are coming out. And we got a few tours to talk about as well. If you're not already, head on over to Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok and give us a follow at Matrix Music Review. Head on over to Spotify and like our Control-Alt-Save playlist. That's where you can find all of the music that's been reviewed on this episode, plus some other ones that I may have listened to and liked throughout the week, as I can't talk about everything. And as always, as I always ask, head on over to Apple Music, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. Leave us a thumbs up, leave us a 5-star review, give us some comments, kind of help drive some more traffic to our channel and keep growing our little community of music nerds that everybody can be up to date on all these great new bands and all this great new music that's out, and let everybody know that pop punk is not dead. So we're going to jump right into our album reviews this week, and the first one that we're going to talk about is Suburban Dictionary from FRND CRCL. So these guys jumped on my radar earlier this year. I know I talked about them a little bit, and they have been a supporter of the podcast as well. I do want to put that out there, that I'm so happy that they've been, sharing things and, really liking the content that we put out as well. But this is an instant classic album for me. This is exactly what I anticipated getting from them when I heard the first couple of songs, No Chill, F California, Clinically Insane. This is exactly what I was expecting. They kind of have that classic Blink-182 sound mixed with some modern pop punk production that really just gives you that perfect summertime album that can really transport you back into, taking beach trips with friends and just playing those different songs on the beach and just hanging out and having a great time without a care in the world. That's exactly what this type of music reminds me of. When we're looking track by track, like I always do, Golden obviously stands out, where it's a "you're golden in my eyes" statement. And sonically, that just really hits a home run for me. That was one of the first things that drew me in, was the sound of that song. And then after Golden, I think we have a potential Song of the Year candidate, at least in my eyes, in Orange Tang. And there's a lot of different lyrics in there that really stood out to me. You have "you're glitter candy coated, that I can never get enough of," and "I'm a dull knife and you're a gunfight." There's just little things, little pieces of wordplay in that entire song of Orange Tang that really just make that stand out. And it's really just a cut above the rest, even then, more so than some of the other bands and other acts that I've heard that have been around forever that have released albums this year that I've talked about lyricism. There's just something about this Orange Tang song that's really kind of stuck out to me as, this is something that is going to continue to be played for me over and over again this year, and really is standing out as a potential strong candidate for our end of the year list. And I talk about album structure a lot on the podcast, and how that can sometimes make or break an album. And I think FRND CRCL hits another home run with that piece of this album, is that it's structured really well. I think a lot of people are skipping the very first track, 7 a.m., because it's just an instrumental and it's just a lead into No More Bad Days. And same thing with Midnight. It's just kind of this instrumental lead into the next song, but those instrumentals really set the tone for what that next song is going to be. And artists put those in there for a reason. They don't just put them in there as filler, because even if you took those out, these 12 songs are spectacular on their own. But I think together with those two little instrumentals, and they're not long, they're 30, 40 seconds, I think, it really just shows the artistic expression and the artistic creativity that FRND CRCL has, and really what sets them apart from some of these other artists that I've reviewed this year. We have a classic pop punk song in Don't Wait Up. That really kind of gave me a Boys Like Girls sound for some reason. I don't know why. I was feeling like 2 is better than 1 mixed with Love Drunk from them is really what was happening here. And, it really just hit all of those check boxes. I can see this one, Don't Wait Up, being a crowd favorite at a live show for some reason. That's just kind of the vibe I'm getting from it, that this is going to be a crowd favorite that they're going to want to sing back. And then, finishing up here on some of the track by track stuff, that instrumental lead in of Midnight into WYNWM, it really just stands out. And the whole second verse of that song is just a perfect display of lyrical awesomeness. I don't really have a better word other than awesomeness to say for that one. That entire second verse is just perfection in wordplay, perfection in showing just some lyrical prowess. And Friend Circle finishes it off with a classic pop punk album, Ender, which is a little bit on the slower side, and it kind of gives you that forward-looking sound, that forward-looking, hopeful nature of what this could lead into. And it opens the door for, some potentially more upbeat songs, if you will, in the future. Not that any of these were particularly downbeat, but it gives you that option to then pursue those different themes on your next album. So overall, obviously, I really enjoyed this album. I think you guys know that when I ramble on for a little bit longer than I probably should about certain albums, that it is definitely one that stood out to me and definitely one that I'm excited about. This is one that I have recommended to people that they've come back and said, where has this type of music been? This is what I've been missing. These are the types of sounds that I've been wanting. And, that's exactly what I expected from these guys. I could not be happier with that. I know they're getting to some shows around me soon. Hopefully I can go check them out when they're in my area, because I think it would just be great to see these guys live. I have a feeling they put on one hell of a show. So if you haven't checked it out yet, go over and check out Suburban Dictionary from Friend Circle. Next, we got the new EP, Convinced, from Anberlin. So a pretty quality EP here from Anberlin. You get the hard-hitting opener of Lacerate, and I love the chorus of it where it says, "My heart can't break holding your memory, so lacerate, lacerate." And it's just, again, you guys know I'm big on wordplay, so anytime something like that pops up, I'm going to have to mention it. And what really was interesting to me about this specific EP was the way Anberlin really approached some of these topics. They gave a little bit of a heavier tone or heavier lyric to just this potential heartbreak that could have been going on, or these potential relationship problems that they may be facing. And a song like Banshee, which is really just super heavy and emotional, is one that really proves that point. Even though they slowed down the music on it, it really proves my point of the way that they attacked, kind of talking about some of these topics. Nothing more the EP Ender was a little unexpected, but I did enjoy it. I think people may be surprised when they get to that track and, the last minute and a half or, potentially even longer is instrumental. I think that's a great way to end it and just kind of let everybody wind down and fade out from the end of that EP. So, overall, it's a pretty small project. I think it was only 4 or 5 songs. It was very solid in my opinion. I think Lacerate probably is still my favorite. I like the up-tempo, hard-hitting nature of it, so that one's probably going to be the one I gravitate to a little bit more. But if you haven't checked it out, go check out Convinced from Anberlin. Next up, we got Homebound, the EP from Voltage Avenue. So this is another one of those solid pop-punk finds that I've had recently. I'm on a streak right now where it feels like every week I'm discovering another pop-punk band that's really taken us back to our roots. And Voltage Avenue is no exception. Start to finish, you get strong instrumentation, strong lyricism on this, and you get that classic sound. Last week when I talked about the old Neon album, we had that classic sound, but I felt like we also had some modern or progressive pop-punk production that we're seeing from modern-day bands. And Voltage Avenue really kind of stuck more to the classic side, which I think was fine. It's just a little different coming off of what I've had in the past. But the song I want to point out from this one, there's 2 of them. The first one is Worth Fighting For. That is an absolute banger of a track that's really just talking all about being unhappy in a potential relationship, and is this really worth fighting for? Are we going to fight for this? I didn't ever think we would get to this point, but now that we are we going to fight for it, or are we just going to kind of let it go away and just be done? And speaking of done, that song towards the end of it has one of my favorite lyrics in it, and it says, "Am I starting to feel better, or is it just the coffee kicking in?" And that's really something that I feel like everybody can relate to. Now, obviously, this is talking more about the situation in the track, probably more about, heartbreak or whatever's going on. But I think everybody can have that moment where, am I getting better? Am I getting more awake? Or is it just the coffee that's kicking in? What is it that's actually waking me up and getting me moving? So I don't have a whole lot to say about this Voltage Avenue EP. I like it a lot. I want to spend a little more time with it. I know Done was the one that I found. I think I found it on social media. They just kind of popped up for me, and that song kind of drew me in, and I was happy to see that I was getting an EP this past week. So more and more important to find things on social media, apparently, because that's where I'm finding most of these bands that I'm introducing to you guys. So if you haven't heard of them or haven't checked them out yet, great new EP this past week from Voltage Avenue called Homebound. Go check it out. And the last album I just want to talk about very briefly, I didn't write much down or anything down about this one, is the new album from Throw the Fight, which is called Strange World. This has a couple of those tracks that I've talked about on the podcast before, so I'm not going to get back into it. This was a really solid metal/metalcore album. I only was able to listen to it once or twice with some of the other music that I was focusing on, but this is a really strong album. I want to do a little bit deeper of a, look into it before I give you guys a full review, but I did want to mention it because it is very strong. Strange World from Throw the Fight. Go check it out. I'll get a bigger review for you guys a little bit later down the road. That wraps it up for our album reviews this week. We're going to head on over and do our single reviews now, with the first one being Taking Time from Free Friends. So a relatively new group to me, but this is a group that has what I would consider a blended sound. I don't think you can place them in one specific genre or even one specific subgenre of alternative. They have a little bit of pop punk, they have a little bit of punk to it, they got a little bit of that skate punk sound, but it's got all of my favorite sounds kind of blended into one that makes this sound just so good. And Taking Time's been kind of on repeat since I've discovered it, so I'm hoping you guys will like it just as much as I do. Taking Time from Free Friends. Go check it out. Next track is Get Away from Basement Gary. I don't know what is going on this year. Maybe I'm just been sleeping the past few years, but it feels like to me every time I turn around I'm getting a brand new skate punk track that I just love. And I don't know if they consider themselves that subgenre, but it's what it sounds like to me. And this track from Basement Gary is no different. I love the sound. I love the repetitive nature of the chorus to really drive home the point. So go check out Get Away from Basement Gary. Next track is Better Way Out from Caskets. Caskets is a band that I always tend to love their sound, and this track is no different for me. I love the song. I love the sound. I'm really looking forward to a new project from Caskets so that I can review it here on the podcast. I haven't really had a platform to review them before, but I do now, so I'm looking forward to that in the future. But in the meantime, go check out Better Way Out from Caskets. Next track is Cheers to Goodbye from Escape the Fate and Ice Nine Kills. So this seems like a return to form track for me for Escape the Fate. They were one of my favorite bands coming up in the alternative scene, and one of the bands that I can honestly say kind of helped spark my interest in the scene again. That was around the time that they released their song Empire, which I know probably wasn't a critical favorite, but for some reason it sparked it in me to kind of get back into the genre and get back into the scene a little bit. So I got to give them props for helping get me back into this where I am now. So go check out Cheers to Goodbye from Escape the Fate and Ice Nine Kills. Next up is Code Mistake from Corpse featuring Bring Me the Horizon. So the better of the two Bring Me the Horizon features this week. Definitely like the heaviness that Corpse brings on this track, and obviously Bring Me the Horizon fits right in with that. The Bring Me the Horizon feature with Lil Uzi Vert is not terrible. It's just probably not one that I'm going to discuss on the podcast, and it's not really one that I'm going to end up going back to a whole lot. It just didn't really click for me for some reason. Like I said, it's not a bad track. It just didn't really click for some reason, and that's okay. That happens sometimes. So if you want a good feature from Bring Me the Horizon, go check out their new track Code Mistake with Corpse. Next up is Flow from Smash Into Pieces. I absolutely love the production in this track. That's really why I wanted to mention it in the podcast. You know, the production behind it is just so clean and so smooth that, you know, sometimes I have to nerd out a little bit when it comes to those things, and really, you know, those are the only reasons that I want to talk about it. But I love this track from Smash Into Pieces. I think you guys will too. Go check out their new one, Flow. Next track is Fantasy from Rage Doll. Again, another band that I just kind of found this week. Really interesting style, really interesting sound. They are a little different than what I've reviewed in the past, and the best way I can describe the sound of this track in particular is that it has a real haunting sound and a real haunting feel to it. But even though it has that like haunting, eerie, spooky feel, I really enjoy it. You know, it's a little bit different, and it kind of is a change up from what I've been listening to. And sometimes you need that little change up to kind of bring you back around and get you reinterested in things. And that's exactly what happened with this track. So go check out Fantasy from Rage Doll. And the last track we're going to talk about is Underneath My Skin from Oni featuring Kellin Quinn. Another great track, a weekly Kellin Quinn update, I feel like, is that he's always got a new track out, whether that's his own or he's hopping on somebody else's. You know, I talked about him last week with his track record and how he's approaching the Lil Wayne T-Pain feature dominance that we saw in the mid to late 2000s from them. Kellin Quinn's kind of bringing that back for the alternative scene this year. So go check out Underneath My Skin from Oni and Kellin Quinn. That wraps it up for our music review this week, but I got two tours that I want to talk to you guys about. The first one being 5 Seconds of Summer, announcing their tour with support from Meet Me at the Altar. I wanted to touch on this one because I am super stoked for Meet Me at the Altar. They get to open for 5 Seconds of Summer, which I know that they've mentioned how big of an influence they are, but also that they get to open in Madison Square Garden for them. That is so cool for them. I'm so stoked for them. And, you know, I can't wait to see what that show ends up doing for them. I think it's going to push them into the next level of superstardom. And the last tour I want to talk about is one that was announced earlier last week. Icon for Hire, with support from Conquer Divide, The Funeral Portrait, and Concrete Castles. That's another really interesting tour. I'm excited to see if that one's coming to my area. I checked it out, but I can't remember if it is or not. But if it is in your area, go check it out. That just about wraps it up for us here this week on Matrix Music Review. I hope everybody enjoyed these reviews and goes and checks out some of this music. It is all fantastic. Wanted to give you guys a little update that next week we will not be having our normal music review episode. It will actually be a special episode that I'm putting out for you guys. Don't worry, anything released within the next week or two will be covered in the next podcast when we get on there. I won't forget to review it, but next week I want to do something a little different for you guys. I want to kind of just take a look back at the first half of the year. Let's talk about some of the albums that I'm thinking are going to, you know, be in our top 20. What albums have been in my top so far this year? What songs have really stood out to me this year? Are there any events or anything that's really kind of stood out in the alternative music scene or genre this year? And just kind of see what you guys think and see if you agree with me that, you know, what albums are big and what albums are, you know, kind of falling away and just didn't stay with me for some reason. So stay tuned for that next week. That'll come out next week, probably on Wednesday or Thursday for you guys. And in the meantime, head on over to Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok and give us a follow at Matrix Music Review to stay up to date with us on a daily basis. Head on over to Spotify and check out our Control-Alt-Save playlist, which will be linked in the description of this episode, where you can catch all the music that was reviewed on this episode and much more. and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Music or Spotify. Help us continue to grow our community. And you can continue to do that by sharing the podcast with your friends, sharing our Instagram page with your friends, telling them to follow us so that we can continue to build our little community here. As always, for my Spotify listeners, we're going to let an artist play us out. And this week, I'm giving it to Friend Circle and their song Orange Tang.